Look at me. That's me as a baby.
Alright, let's move ahead.
I recently rewatched The Emperor's New Groove, and I gotta say, after all these years, it's still one of the funniest animated movies Disney has ever released. It's crazy watching it now and seeing how ahead of its time it was. A classic that ditched the usual fairy tale vibes for pure, unfiltered comedy. And not your typical Disney humor. Disney movies of the 90s always included jokes, but they were usually tucked into the background or saved for the occasional sarcastic sidekick. The Emperor's New Groove, though, is like one big joke. The movie never takes itself seriously, not even for a second, and instead revels in its own absurdity.
Whoa, look at these wrinkles. What is holding this woman together? What the? How long has that been there?
Genius. It is comedic gold, and its unique brand of humor sets it apart from other cartoons of its time, and to some extent, today's too. It's actually kind of sad knowing the feeling you got watching this when it came out will probably never be replicated. And crazy thing is, they never wrote a script for the movie, they just made it. It goes to show that you don't need to have a big plan to make incredible content. Emperor's New Groove and Wish are so different from each other. They're like two extremes right next to each other. But back then, Disney was actually trying to entertain and tell good stories. Now it's all about the money. Emperor's New Groove came out in 2000 and took all the tropes we'd come to expect from Disney, princesses, romance, magical songs, and tossed them out the window. It's one of those things where you just had to be there. They dodged quite a few of the Disney tropes and cliches, and it was refreshing. Instead, we got a movie about a selfish emperor turned llama. Yes, a llama. Kuzco.
Oh yeah. No! You threw off my groove!
I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove.
His journey of kind of self-discovery and a villain who loves potions almost as much as she loves maniacal laughter. Kuzco is the narcissistic pampered emperor who's the literal embodiment of "it's all about me." But considering Inca emperors were regarded as living gods by the people, it's no wonder he became an egotistical jerk.
Your hair, not likely. Yikes, 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 and let me guess, you have a great personality. Is this really the best you could do?
He is the highest ranking royal in the Disney canon. Plus, being raised by Yzma didn't help. Within the first 5 minutes, he breaks the fourth wall to narrate his own story and then immediately insults the audience watching. This is probably the best opening to a Disney movie. It tells you everything about the character before the movie starts. It has everything: the humor, how the character is powerful, self-centered, and also a not-so-subtle hint that he might be evil. Like, who else could get away with roasting the people who came to see the movie? It's like he's saying, yeah, I'm a llama. Yeah, I'm narrating my own story, and no, I don't really care if you like it. Right away, the movie tells you it's going to do its own thing with a wink and a nod at the audience. Fast forward to now, we have a ton of cartoons that use this self-aware humor. The Amazing World of Gumball, Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman. But The Emperor's New Groove did it before it was cool. It actually helped set the stage for this self-aware humor we see so much in animation now. It's almost like it was an accident that it was released back then, because it definitely fits in the time we're in now. Kuzco's sarcastic, selfish humor feels like it's straight out of a 2020 TikTok rant or an Instagram meme, but here it was back in 2000, making audiences laugh before sarcasm was practically a second language. Then there's the comedic duo of Kuzco and Pacha. The two play off each other perfectly. Kuzco as the arrogant, self-centered jerk, and Pacha as the humble, lovable everyman. The contrast in their personalities is what makes the comedy land. Pacha's constant exasperation with Kuzco's antics and his cluelessness makes the moments where he realizes he has to rely on Pacha even funnier. He's so sure of himself, so blissfully unaware of the fact that he needs Pacha to survive that you can't help but laugh. And Pacha, bless him, is there gritting his teeth, wondering why he's even trying to save this guy. Their dynamic was a refreshing departure from the usual hero and sidekick trope. They aren't friends on a mission, they're enemies forced to team up. And that tension creates some of the best comedy, especially the ones we see today in shows like Adventure Time or Regular Show, where the leads aren't exactly role models, but are hilarious in their dysfunction. But no discussion of The Emperor's New Groove would be complete without Yzma and Kronk.
Pull the lever, Kronk. Wrong lever!
Huh?
Why do we even even have that lever.
Yzma is hands down one of the funniest villains ever. Definitely not your typical evil sorceress or terrifying villain. Instead, she's a petty, power-hungry bureaucrat with a taste for dramatic entrances and wild potion schemes. She gets fired and then decides to go ballistic. Her simple goal was to kill Kuzco because she felt he had hurt her and she was right to do so. And RIP to Eartha Kitt, the amazing voice acting. Yzma would not have been as great of a character with someone else's voice. She is one of the few villains I would actually want to see an origin story from. And then there's Kronk, who's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Kronk has the physical prowess of a superhero, but the mind of, well, Kronk. But he does have a high-paying job working as the right-hand man of the Emperor's advisor. He can cook, he's good with animals and kids, he can dance, he's got muscles, and he's funny. This is the high-value man people talk about today. I even saw a fan say, my high expectations of partners didn't come from romance books, they came from Emperor's New Groove. Yzma's constantly exasperated by his cluelessness, while Kronk is just happily along for the ride, oblivious to the fact that he's supposed to be the bad guy. This kind of humor, the villain who's more annoyed than evil, and the dim-witted henchman, wasn't very common in Disney at the time. Yzma and Kronk are comedic foils, rather than true threats, and that lets the audience laugh at them in a way that we can't with like Scar or Ursula. It's like Disney took the traditional villain mold, threw it out the window, and said, let's just make this duo as weird as possible. And it worked brilliantly. If you compare them to modern cartoons, you see shades of Yzma and Kronk's ridiculousness in villains like Ice King from Adventure Time or Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. These characters are so quirky that you almost root for them. They're villains, sure, but they're also just trying to get by. Yzma and Kronk paved the way for this type of funny, non-threatening villain. They are two of the better-written villainous duos written for a children's movie. The movie was in a production nightmare and was almost scrapped. It was originally supposed to be a Prince and the Pauper style story, but test audiences and Disney execs hated it. So they completely scrapped the original idea and changed it to be more of a slapstick comedy. And while it didn't do well in Disney standards in theaters, it gained a huge home video fandom for its fourth wall-breaking humor. And speaking of, the fourth wall is shattered in this movie, and that's a big part of its appeal. Right from the opening scene, Kuzco is talking directly to the audience, letting us know we're in for a wild ride. There are moments when he pauses the action to make a snide remark or rolls his eyes at his own narrative. It's meta before meta was the norm, and it's hilarious because it makes you as the audience feel like you're in on the joke. His narration even plays on typical story tropes. When he rewinds the movie to emphasize a point, basically acknowledging that the story doesn't really matter. It's just an excuse for a bunch of gags strung together. The fact that Kuzco is telling us this directly makes it even funnier, because he's basically letting the audience know that he doesn't care about the movie's rules. Breaking the fourth wall has become a staple in modern media. Characters like Deadpool owe a lot to movies like The Emperor's New Groove. Shows like BoJack Horseman do this too, constantly poking fun at their own storylines and ridiculous tropes. But where BoJack is a bit darker, The Emperor's New Groove keeps it light and playful. One of the things that makes this movie so rewatchable is its perfect timing and use of visual gags. There's a physical comedy element to it that we rarely see in animated films. Like the way Kuzco and Pacha's antics are exaggerated. The movie doesn't waste a second. There's no downtime. Even small moments, like Kuzco swatting a bee out of his face, are hilarious because of how they're animated and timed. Then there's the infamous Kuzcotopia scene, where Kuzco describes his dream summer home and the camera zooms in on the tiny model, making every kid watching want their own model village. It's a quick gag, but the movie's pace and timing make it land perfectly. You could probably watch this movie on mute and still get most of the jokes because they're so well animated and exaggerated. Cartoons today don't always lean on visual gags like this, at least not in the same way. Shows like Family Guy or The Simpsons rely on more dialogue-based humor. Even Rick and Morty is usually about clever wordplay rather than physical comedy, while The Emperor's New Groove does both, making it a rare gem that balances quick one-liners with goofy slapstick in a way that's almost timeless. What's interesting about this movie is that it appeals to people of all ages. Kids love it for the goofy llama antics and exaggerated expressions, while adults appreciate the irony and cleverness of the script. It's a rare example of a family film that doesn't feel watered down or overly sweet. Instead, it feels like it was made by a group of writers who just wanted to see how much they could get away with. It resonates with the sarcastic, meme-heavy culture we've grown up with. Kuzco's dismissive attitude? That's basically meme material in and of itself. He's the ultimate main character in a world that's tired of main characters. Millennials have latched onto Kuzco's style of humor because it embodies a kind of playful, narcissistic energy that's both hilarious and relatable in an era where everyone's, ironically, the main character in their own story. This is the origin of our personalities. Another reason The Emperor's New Groove hit so hard, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, is that it gave us flawed characters who didn't pretend to be heroes. Kuzco starts out as a grade-A jerk, and Pacha's just an ordinary guy trying to save his village. Unlike typical Disney protagonists who are kind-hearted and morally pure, Kuzco has no problem being awful. He's selfish, bratty, and totally unlikable at first. But that's exactly why we love him. The same goes for Yzma and Kronk. They're villains, but not in a traditional way. Yzma's evil plans are hilariously petty, like trying to kill Kuzco over an office dispute. Kronk? He's the kind of guy who'd probably help an old lady cross the street on his way to do villain stuff. The movie's comedy thrives on this lack of perfect characters, making it way more relatable for audiences who are tired of flawless heroes. This flawed human approach has become a big deal in modern cartoons. BoJack Horseman, Big Mouth, or even Bob's Burgers are full of imperfect characters who are lovable specifically because they're flawed. The Emperor's New Groove showed us that Disney didn't have to make everyone squeaky clean to be relatable, and it's a trend that cartoons have embraced ever since. If you had to sum up The Emperor's New Groove in one word, chaotic might be the best fit. The story zigzags wildly from one bizarre situation to another, and instead of focusing on a traditional hero's journey, the plot is just Kuzco stumbling from one mess to the next. The entire thing is unpredictable, like a whirlwind of random gags and situations that somehow flow together seamlessly. I think the chaotic energy here is reminiscent of meme culture and TikTok's fast, jumpy humor that we are obsessed with today. It's like the film knew that years later we'd be living in a world of short-form content and Vine-esque randomness where scenes barely connect but somehow still entertain. The film's structure itself feels like a meme reel where each scene has its own punchline. Fun fact, this movie was originally going to be a musical titled Kingdom of the Sun, but the creators decided to scrap the idea and instead make it a comedy. Even then, we get one of the best films made by Disney, despite low expectations from the filmmakers. The Emperor's New Groove is comedic gold because it threw out the Disney. It paved the way for the kind of self-aware, chaotic humor that's a staple in modern cartoons and is a perfect fit for today's meme-loving, sarcastic culture. For millennials, it's a nostalgic trip back to a time when Disney movies could be unapologetically weird. For Gen Z, it's an introduction to a timeless kind of humor that doesn't need to rely on pop culture references or current slang to get a laugh. It's a movie that doesn't just want you to enjoy the story, it wants you to laugh at it. It was a comedy before Disney really did comedies. And it showed us that sometimes the best stories are the ones that don't take themselves seriously. With all that being said, though, the movie might not have the same effect as people who saw it 20 years ago when you are already totally submerged in today's media. Although such a film was never designed to have a lot of nuances, even for adults it had significant impact. But tell me what you think down in the comment section below. Don't forget to also like and subscribe. Turn your post notifications on if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Until next time.